Sir, you need evening newspapers more than tea today. The employee's tone was so serious and meaningful that I was shocked and reached out and took the newspaper from his hand. He had shown so much frankness, otherwise he would only talk about necessity. As soon as I looked at the headline of the newspaper, darkness started floating around my eyes and the newspaper fell from my hand. The police had also found a wristwatch from the crime scene, which was possibly being taken as a clue by the police. The gift was no longer in my hand, but the watch was being seen by the police as evidence. That watch could have belonged to the girl's killer. Now I was realizing why the clerk had given me the newspapers. My head was spinning. The police could have reached me very quickly. The employee was watching my changing facial expressions. Suddenly, Dew smiled very politely and said, "No problem, sir. Let it be with me. The picture of the watch is yours. Anyway, the secret of the owners is the employee's own, and that is meaningful. I won't tell anyone about the newspaper," Leah said. My heart and mind were confused as to what to say in the end, because the employee stood in my hand many times. Scene tied. "Well, if you prove your loyalty, I will make you happy." I said one thing at a time, emphasizing said. The employee was happy to hear me and then said in a slightly meaningful tone, "What about 25, 50,000 in these cases?" There are times. By sensing the employee's tone and blackmail, there was a bad firestorm. Out of anger, my body began to drink. "Get out of here. You don't have a foot. I went ahead and grabbed him by the neck and said, shaking him, "No problem, sir. As you wish," he replied, changing his eyes. The open challenge in his eyes was proof that he might as well go to the police. "Shameless man. Go wherever you want. But remember, I have to pay millions to the policeman. But I will not give you a dime and I will rot you in jail." The employee did not respond to my words. Instead, he looked at me while biting his lips and then quickly got up and walked away. The speed with which the situation had changed had left me confused. After Nisva's departure, I fell on the bed and started thinking about the situation. "Why don't you give me a bar? But remember this much. Mehar Hayaugi." Joya's scent became deeper. Probably it was her. It meant that she was making fun of my helplessness. Well, I also thought that if the employee went to the police, I would turn away. This thought strengthened me, and I got up, went into the bathroom, took a bath, and came out. It was 8 o'clock at night. It was time for me to go to the club. Today my intention was to meet Mapara. I reached my room and put on my shoes. At that moment, the fragrance associated with the ruby permeated my energy. I felt a firestorm after smelling it. "You are looking very much in love. There is an intention to strike someone's heart." Ruby's sarcastic voice hit my ears. After hearing this, I was completely burnt. "The kebab is done." "I mean you," I slurred. In response, she laughed again in his cheerful voice. "Heard a bad thing is a good thing, and loyalty. A sarcastic wife means everything her husband says. You do anything. Ruby, remember that one day I will find a way to get rid of it." I answered Ruby's dogged CC. "That day will never come. Even if such a day comes, I will force you so much that you will strangle yourself with your own hands. You, Joe Aba." I only licked my lips because I had not yet found someone who could deliver me from this spirit. I was busy eating when suddenly I heard Ruby's voice again. "The police will be here soon. You made my murder a suicide, but you will definitely get caught in Rena's murder." I mouthed to answer him. It was open when the door rang, and I was shocked to hear this door ringing style so well. I knew from when I opened the door in the door. A police officer was entering the room with his son and the same employee. My heart sank after seeing the police officer, and on the other hand, seeing the policeman, I realized that he was the same officer who was the investigating officer in connection with Ruby's murder. Looking at his eyes, I felt like a butcher slaughtering a goat. "How are you? Mr. Atash heard your time is bad." He spoke in a meaningful tone. "What does it mean?" I was shocked. After listening to my words, he smiled, spoken in an official manner. "I come to the point, Mr. Atesh." Having said that, he took a photo from his pocket. He took out the graph, which was the occasion of the incident. in which the picture of this watch was visible. Seeing the picture, my anxiety deepened, which I put on my face, not allowed to appear. "Sir, my watch was stolen. You filed a complaint with the police." He spoke in a pure official tone. "No. Why, he is like an eagle," he said, looking at me. "Sir, I thought such a modest watch. What should I hurt you for?" The inspector smiled after listening to me, that he does not believe in me. A few moments, after a pause, he said to my servant, "Called by gesture, do you recognize him?" He looked at his employee very angrily and said, "Sir, I employed him a while back. I have been dismissed from why? No, it is a crime to fire someone from a job. Not a crime, but his statement is that when you left home last night, that watch was tied on your arm." Sam, after listening to Spectre, I suddenly had a thought that if he saw the camera phone of the apartment building and the time I went out, it would be a big problem for me because he would see the clock and it would be enough for me. "The problem may arise, Inspector." I said it softly, beckoned to come closer. Taking my cue, he understood what I wanted, so he approached me with a meaningful smile. As soon as I came near him, I discussed the matter with him after a little discussion. The price was fixed at $500,000. I asked him with great concern, "Hey, what is your employee doing?" This is a trivial matter for the police who were implicated in the case of watch theft and murder. He smiled and said, after saying that, he left. After he left, I heard Ruby sneer as if she was saying, "The game has just started." Ruby Caro's daily harassment had increased. Day by day, Ruby has been creating some trouble for me. It became necessary to get rid of Ruby. Then a friend told me about Jagan. Jagan had given me hope, but Ruby said that he would not be able to do anything. He can go to anyone. Jagan had told me that he would chant and then tell him what to do. So I reached Jagan on the second night because the weather was dangerous since evening. It could rain at any time. So as soon as from the flat, turns out that's when I smelled Ruby's distinctive scent. "You are going to Jagan," he whispered in my ears. "Yes, to get rid of you. It's no use. He called you today, but no matter how much magic he conjures up, he cannot succeed. The spirit of management only increased my powers. Only time will tell whether he will be successful or not." I replied with a smile. Listening to me, Ruby remained silent, and then momentarily, after a pause, she spoke. "What did I spoil your life?" He took away such a blessing and forced him to wander like this. His tone was hoarse. I became silent after listening to her saying that it was true that I had raped her, and later I also realized this. I realized that I abused you. I just got angry with you. The rule was democratic. It wasn't. I laughed at him in response. "Maybe you're right. But you were my husband. You could talk to me," she started saying. "Whatever it is, my death is revenge for you. You were ready to listen." Mirul Haja was stunned. After hearing my words, she got angry. "The purpose is," Ruby replied with a laugh. Then after that, Ruby's voice disappeared. It was 11 o'clock at night when Jagan, from the time we reached the pass, it started to rain lightly. There were signs that the rain may turn to a fast one at some point. Jagan was in the middle of the floor, moving the tools inside his hut, looking at the dam. He had only one diaper on his thin body. The rest of his body was covered with ghost, and on his forehead, half-diagonal lines were drawn with Serbian and white colors. In the middle of it, in Mandal, there was a pit on which a lot of sasanfar was mixed. A candle was lit above the skull, was watching. It was evident from the movement of his lips. Even if he was reading something, it seemed that the lips would have moved and it would have intensified. No, was feeling he was engaged in his practice for a long time, during which the rain outside intensified. But Jagan's chanting. I didn't matter. Jagan didn't seem to care. The sound of rain and thunder of clouds made the atmosphere even more terrifying. Jagan was fully engaged in some dirty act with all his attention. After half an hour, he opened his eyes, and for a moment, I was scared to see his eyes. I felt flames dancing in those eyes. For a long time, he stared at the skull, and then, He looked at me and smiled and said, "Boy, tonight is the night of souls. When there is a path or a home, then the souls become the possessions. Even today, the same night, today I will control the Atma of your fire and become Shakti North, and you will be Shakti. It will be done. Let's take me to his grave." I nodded. Then we both came out of this old cemetery of Parsis in this stormy rain. Jagan, he was holding the same skull in his hands. The rain was still continuing, and we were both getting wet. Reached the car. "Do you believe, Jagan, you own his soul? You will control it." I started the car. Later asked Jagan. The car was now on the road. Car due to rain. The speed was very slow. "Mother Kaylee should be Karpa. He looked at me and smiled. "When I get rid of him, then yours. I will fill my mouth with pearls," I said with a smile. "If Mother Kaylee wills it, it will be so. But that's it. It is not easy. All souls get Shakti on this night, and Ruby's soul must get Shakti. There can be both success and failure," Jagan said seriously. "May Allah make it happen," I replied in a low tone. Hearing my words, he was shocked and looked at me in a very strange manner and said, "This name of Putra does not sound good from your mouth." In the second moment I shocked him. I looked, and then the feeling of guilt began to torment me. I did a couple of wrong things, a ruby blood, and then black magic to get rid of it. Use. This feeling was only for a moment, and then I became the same. No need to be depressed about your poppies. Pop and bean are only games for the weak, of which he has power. He is powerful. He is powerful, Jagan said as if reading my heart. Very soon we entered the graveyard. Jagan had that skull in his hands. The ground of the graveyard was wet due to rain. The speed of the rain had increased now. This skull will have to be placed on Ruby's grave. By the next morning, his soul would have been buried in that skull. Both of us walked slowly and reached in front of Ruby's grave. His grave is decorated with marble. Had become wet due to, as soon as we both reached the grave, we both stopped in shock. The scene itself was so terrifying and amazing that my eyes were filled with tears. A white cat was sitting on Ruby's tombstone. That cat was bigger and taller than normal cats. The most amazing thing was that its eyes were not ebony like normal cats, but red. Seeing Lily sniffing Ruby's favorite scent in the air, Jagan's lips began to smile in disdain as if the cat existed for him. "It doesn't make any sense. By imprisoning your soul in this skull, I will take..." There was contempt in his tone. "Try and see but fail. Will remain." Ruby's whispering voice echoed through the graveyard's hoarse air. In response, Jagan's disgusting laughter echoed in the air. But Jagan kept this skull together and started reading something in his heart. At that moment, the cat attacked Jagan. He also gave it to the chicken. Jagan could not bear his burden and fell down. The skull slipped from his hand and fell into an open grave. In the grave of the skull, there was a sound of an explosion, and the high flames of fire came out of the grave. Seeing this condition of the skull, I saw fear in Jagan's eyes for the first time. She was scratching Jagan badly. Her whole face was covered in blood. Seeing Jagan's condition, I ran towards him. As soon as I got close to her, the cat vanished as if she had never existed. Jagan was taking his last breath. His whole body, a lot of life was present in his half-dead body due to Shia's condition. Was Haj John Bub to be saved? T-Tibet sea trip. You asked of the sea travel without any difficulty. You, if completed. He finished his speech with difficulty, and his neck fell. Suddenly, my eyes went towards the open grave, and I saw that there were big fat people from this grave. The insect rushed towards Jagan's dead body. Maybe they were insects eating corpses in the grave. Must have been. The number of these insects was in thousands. I immediately retreated in fear, as these insects made Jagan's body their food for me. Because it was quite surprising. When these insects left Jagan's body, my eyes were filled with fear. Instead of the chicken that was left, there was now its structure, in which the meat had been left in places. Suddenly the air echoed with Ruby's venomous laughter. My face was pale with fear. The attachment, bee insects could have licked your body, but your death was not my purpose. My aim is only to torture you. I want you to beg me for death. You sleep till death, then after that, if my heart desires, I will give you death in alms. After saying that, she went to Jana. His poisons were yellow, falling like open lead in my ears. I had a passion for tourism since my childhood. I wanted to sit on a ship and travel to the sea, but what did I know that my dream would come true in exchange for saving my life? So I chose South Africa for the sea trip. In this sea voyage, the ship I chose was a small ship with all the amenities of life, including a restaurant, a separate games room, and a single-decker bar. It belonged to the billionaire sheikh, who had decorated for himself with great love and sophistication. When this sheikh's heart was full, he started operating the ship on hire. Ruby didn't try to stop me on that ship trip, but he said that no matter how many trips he took, he couldn't get rid of me. 2 floors of the ship were for passengers, and the remaining one was for the crew. The captain of the ship was named Charlie. Villa Charlie was a simple man from Portugal. Charlie was always a man of his work. He was 65 years old, his body parts were very strong, and his hair was white. His forehead and facial features showed his determination. The second personality of the ship was the vice captain of the ship, whose name was Edgar. Edgar was from Denmark. Although he appears to be very well-mannered and well-mannered, I don't know why I feel that this person is very spiteful and cunning. The reason for thinking so was his small eyes, in which I always saw slyness. The third figure of the ship's crew is Lady Doctor, Martha. She was about 26, 27 years old. My heart always went out of control when I saw this woman. Martha was from California. She got a job on this ship after her husband died. To ease the grief of her loneliness, no one would have guessed that Martha was a divorced woman by looking at Martha. She was extremely beautiful and possessed of attractive physical features that every man with a heart could aspire to have. Seeing Martha, a smile appeared on Edgar's lips, but the answer was a smile. I would definitely give it, which made me realize that there is something between the two of them. There was one more person in the crew of the ship named Jimmy. Carlos was from England. Jimmy, like his name, was of considerable occult significance and was well known among the ship's crew. I didn't know, but every time I looked at him, a strange image would appear on his plump lips. It happened so many times, I don't know why. I felt like Jimmy knew a lot about me. I thought I would meet Jimmy and talk about it at some point. Why did he smile when he saw me? I felt one thing from Jimmy. The ship's crew was often scared because of G's predictions, which proved to be 70 to 80% correct. But Jimmy was very popular among the ship's passengers, especially among the girls, and one day I mentioned Jimmy to the captain of the Brisbane ship. On hearing my words, the old captain's broad forehead appeared with a number of crooked diagonal lines as an expression of displeasure. For a few moments, he kept thinking and then said, "My dear, stay away from me too." "Why?" I asked, shocked. After listening to my words, he was lost in thought. The changing expressions on his face were showing his mental struggle. That he should tell me. After thinking for a long time, he took a cold breath and said, "Maybe Jimmy is hiding something in you. The soul is visible." I was shocked to hear what he meant. "It means that my dear Jami is an expert in summoning spirits." Ada came out of my mouth involuntarily, and my heart started beating very fast. It meant that G was surrounded by Ruby. The spirit of has appeared, or he has become aware of my past. I was just thinking about it. I was still thinking when suddenly the captain's whispering voice again hit my ears. 2 years have passed since today. A widow had traveled within a few days of her grandfather. A good understanding developed with Carlos, and they both made a pact, and then one day. The captain paused for a few seconds. Shadows of fear and terror are being born on his face. After a pause of a few children, he said, "The weather that day was very pleasant, and so was the sea. It was moderate, and there were no effects of the storm. In those days, I saw G very happy. Jai and Katie were going out as usual in the evening. They both had a drink every day. The two of them were jokingly getting off the train and heading to their respective cabins, when suddenly Katie was confronted by an old black woman of African descent. The impact was so severe that the old lady fell down and got a severe injury on her forehead. Katie was supposed to apologize to her, but she laughed out loud when she saw the woman. My dear, you will not believe that despite being injured, that woman got up with the speed of lightning and started twirling the unruly thick garlands around her neck. Her eyes were red and foam was coming out of her mouth due to her abuse. Then people saw this woman swearing. She was cursing Katie when she was gay. She did not agree and left there. Katie made fun of this woman and continued to make fun of her for a long time after she left. Having said this, the captain became silent. I saw that the captain's face was still full of fear. A strange fear was visible on his face. Jimmy tried hard to find this woman, but she was not found. I don't know where she went. According to the statement of the passengers of the ship, that African witch, she was an actor. After 4 days of this incident, Katie was found spitting blood when she died. In the same condition, she died 3 days later. After that, it was as if Jimmy had gone crazy. After a few days, we saw immense peace on Jamie's face. Upon finding out, he began to learn the process of summoning spirits. Surely he will summon Katie's spirit? What do you think, Captain, that he has learned the process of summoning spirits? I said, emphasizing each of my words. My dear, he has been with me for the past 10 years, and this is what he claims. Among the passengers traveling on this ship, most of them have confirmed this. I was shocked to hear him say that he meant that he could summon Ruby's spirit. Thinking that he might have some way to get rid of the spirit, I decided to meet him tonight. After leaving the captain, I went to the restaurant with the intention of having evening tea, and after ordering my tea, I sat down at the table. I saw them go to a table while saying hello to other passengers. I thought that they should be polite and talk about Jimmy Carlos. So thinking this, I got up from my desk and went straight to his desk. Both of them were talking to each other in a very pleasant atmosphere. Seeing me approaching him, Edgar looked up at me, his little eyes filled with distaste for me. He probably didn't like me getting in the middle of his secrets. It seemed that today he was immoral with his style. This was confirmed by demonstration. Martha smiled slightly, looking at me, addressed me in an insulting tone. Mr. Atesh. His lips, but there was a professional smile. I want to talk to you about something. I looked at Edgar. Edgar was shocked to hear me. Looked at why the bitterness of his tone to me couldn't hide. Sensing his secret, I spoke at once. Edgar, I know that my arrival is bad for you. I won't take much time. Hearing this, his face became a little less violent. Mr. Atesh, what do you want? After listening to him, I stopped for a few moments and said, my wife had a car accident 6 months ago today. I have been killed since she separated from me, neither in the day nor in the night. My accent, said, making him sad. Edgar's face looked like this after listening to me. The special situation did not happen, but there was sadness on Martha's face. The polluted male mare ran. Said, Ada. Dear sir, I was very sad. Martha, to do all these things in front of us. The meaning of Edgar, said dryly. Mar replied, glaring at Edgar, probably not him. Wanted Edgar to be so immoral. Was hit. So lower your eyes to avoid staring. I heard that Jimmy Carlos used to call Rowan, I said with emphasis on each word. Hearing my words, both of them had a look of terror on their faces. Terry is done. Jimmy Carlos, not a good person, Edgar said slowly. What does it mean? I was shocked, and I started to look at him with inexplicable eyes. I saw that Ed Grover, Martha Kay, there was an expression of fear on the face. Jay loved Katie very much, but when the woman cursed Katie, Katie was in a state of death for 4 days and then killed. After that, Jimmy was possessed by a ghost, and he was locked in the cabin all day after completing his duty. He did not know what he was doing inside. Martha now, answered thoughtfully. Then my interest was now piqued. Edgar started touching the roof of the restaurant after listening to me. Stare at the ceiling for a few moments. Then he said, he is responsible for my friend Norman's death. I was so shocked by Edgar's words that I didn't understand anything. What is he saying? I was looking at both of them with clear eyes. The point is that Norman made fun of Letty's death. Jimmy made Norman cry a lot. He did not believe during this time there was a scuffle between the two of them. Norman and Jimmy's reason for saving the people. As the quarrel continued, Jimmy left from there giving dangerous threats. After 2 days, Edgar's eyes were filled with fear. At that moment, I saw Jay coming towards them both. His facial expression was very dangerous. He straight as an arrow, Edgar, had reached. Now he was taking turns looking at the three of us in the restaurant, and there were other passengers who were busy with their own activities. Suddenly I saw the faces of sex. I saw a smile on the face of the sand, and I felt like a chameleon had changed its color. Jimmy was shocked to see him, and so was Edgar. The snake was sniffed. "Mr. Edgar is missing you, Captain." He looked at Edgar softly. I said, but the bitterness of his tone could not be hidden from me. "Everything is already known." As soon as Edgar, when he got up, Jimmy put his hand on his shoulder. Edgar turned to Jai startled, and Jay looked at him. He smiled and said, "My friend Jimmy has thousands of ears, and Jimmy knows everything in advance," he said sharply. Hearing this, I looked into Edgar's eyes. He saw fear, and then he walked away with a quick step. This confirmed that Jimmy Carlos was well aware of the three of us. What happened between... After he leaves, Martha, Jimmy's teeth fell out. "Ma'am, is the name allowed to be yours?" As the quarrel continued, Jimmy left from there giving dangerous threats. After 2 days, Edgar's eyes were filled with fear. At that moment, I saw Jay coming towards them both. His facial expression was very dangerous. He straight as an arrow, Edgar, had reached. Now he was taking turns looking at the three of us in the restaurant, and there were other passengers who were busy with their own activities. Suddenly I saw the faces of sex. I saw a smile on the face of the sand, and I felt like a chameleon had changed its color. Jimmy was shocked to see him, and so was Edgar. The snake was sniffed. "Mr. Edgar is missing you, Captain." He looked at Edgar softly. I said, but the bitterness of his tone could not be hidden from me. "Everything is already known." As soon as Edgar, when he got up, Jimmy put his hand on his shoulder. Edgar turned to Jay startled, and Jay looked at him. He smiled and said, "My friend Jimmy has thousands of ears, and Jimmy knows everything in advance," he said sharply. Hearing this, I looked into Edgar's eyes. He saw fear, and then he walked away with a quick step. This confirmed that Jimmy Carlos was well aware of the three of us. What happened between... After he leaves, Martha, Jimmy's teeth fell out. "Ma'am, is the name allowed to be yours?" "Can sit together." After listening to him, I saw that Bartha's mouth was closed, and Bartha left her coffee unfinished and stood up from the curry. Even after he left, he turned towards me and said with a smile, "How are you, mister?" he said, sitting down. "I am fine," I smiled too, replied with a smile. "Will you stop drinking coffee?" "Yes, Connie." She smiled after listening to me and called Data for coffee. Ordered. Ed must have said that I am not a good person. After the waiter left, he smiled. Hearing this, I was shocked. How did Jay know that Edgar would have said this to me? Think for a few moments. After I said, "The fact is that you were asking him about me." G interrupted me. Answered. I was shocked to hear what he said, which meant that he really possessed super mysterious powers. I was thinking, and Jimmy was watching the changing expressions on my face. He was smiling at my changing expressions. Suddenly, my mind, an idea came to me, and I immediately considered this idea. He was asked what was the reason for the ship's crew and many passengers. "Afraid of you." He was shocked to hear me, and for a few moments, he looked at me and said, "Edgar thinks I'm his friend Norman. Can sit together." After listening to him, I saw that Bartha's mouth was closed, and Bartha left her coffee unfinished and stood up from the curry. Even after he left, he turned towards me and said with a smile, "How are you, mister?" he said, sitting down. "I am fine," I smiled too, replied with a smile. "Will you stop drinking coffee?" "Yes, Connie." G smiled after listening to me and called Data for coffee. Ordered. Ed must have said that I am not a good person. After the waiter left, he smiled. Hearing this, I was shocked. How did G know that Edgar would have said this to me? Think for a few moments. After I said, "The fact is that you were asking him about me." G interrupted me. Answered. I was shocked to hear what he said, which meant that he really possessed super mysterious powers. I was thinking, and Jumi was watching the changing expressions on my face. He was smiling at my changing expressions. Suddenly, an idea came to me, and I immediately considered this idea. He was asked what was the reason for the ship's crew and many passengers afraid of you. He was shocked to hear me, and for a few moments, he looked at me and said, Edgar thinks I'm his friend Norman. I am responsible for his death. Ada. But what happened to Norman? He thought for a few moments and then spoke. Norman made fun of the spirits. Katie died because she cursed the African gods. Norman was killed not by me, but by those spirits who could not bear that any slime was good on their existence. There was a spirit inside his body which forced him to commit suicide by jumping into the sea, and people think that I killed him. Is it true that you can actually summon spirits? Hearing my words, he smiled and said, My friend, if you want today, you can experience this at night. He smiled. He looked at me. In response, I looked at him in shock. So he smiled, as if he wanted me to watch a demonstration of summoning spirits in his lair at night with him. A sudden thought occurred to me. It didn't happen that it was known that I was responsible for Ruby's death. He smiled and said, My friend, stop beating the line of time that has passed and is gone. Of the coming future. Pay attention to hearing this. I jumped and my eyes opened. It seemed as if all of them were left behind. Do you know that Ruby was killed by me? Seeing me worried, the mystery on his lips, the smile spread. I will wait for you tonight, Hope. Yes, you will definitely come. After saying that, he got up and walked out of the restaurant with a quick step. Does Jimmy live on the future? He has become so expert in the work of spirits that he tells him about the coming time in his dreams. But it was impossible for this to happen. Was even after he left, I came out of the restaurant. Many people were walking on the deck. Some people were standing on the deck and watching the sea. Suddenly I was struck by a sight standing on the deck, leaning against the railing, watching the waves of the sea. Martha was a woman with whom I would have been lucky if I had spent some time with her. So I slowly stepped forward and stood beside her. She seemed to be deep in thought. We're towards the waves, listen to me. And rolling his eyes, he looked at me and then waved his eyes again. Took the side. Waves are not as unfaithful as man. Where he roared to the waves. Answered while watching. There was a lot of depth in his speech, he smiled and said, Indeed, waves are not as unfaithful as humans. But when they reach the shore, they also die. He looked at me shocked at my words. Then she spoke. Listen to me. And rolling his eyes, he looked at me and then waved his eyes again. Took the side. Waves are not as unfaithful as man. Where he roared to the waves. Answered while watching. There was a lot of depth in his speech, he smiled and said, Indeed, waves are not as unfaithful as humans. But when they reach the shore, they also die. He looked at me shocked at my words. Then she spoke. But it is the waves that make any boat or ship. It reaches its destination. After listening to him, I smiled and said, You are really quite wise and intelligent. Also, you are blessed. He smiled, answered. After a few moments' pause, she spoke again. You don't go to Jai because Jimmy, he is a dangerous person, and he also does black magic. I was shocked to hear him. Why, what is the reason for all this? Hearing this, he said something that was afraid. Sankar was shocked. Norman's mysterious death and his black magic, caused by, he said in a frightened tone, answered. What did you do? You know Norman and Jimmy, a fight broke out between them, and Jimmy threatened Norman. After that, all the crew of the ship are sure that Jimmy is the reason Norman is crazy, he tells Tarman. But he did some magic that caused him in the sea. He committed suicide by jumping. It may be that Norman has some problem. He said in style. He was very happy Sydney Harbor. But after landing, he wanted to go to his home but not to come to Sydney. Death brought him first, hence my advice. If you want your well-being, stay away from him. It was okay if he was happy. The question of suicide does not arise. I am lost in thoughts, you are thinking. Speech. I am thinking that you are right. If he was really happy, he would commit suicide. What was needed? After listening to me, Martha said in a satisfied manner. He nodded and spoke. I think that he must have a hand in his death in one way or another. That way, he did not commit suicide. We can't even blame him until we have proof. Saying this, I involuntarily put my hand on his hand. As soon as my hand left Martha's, a rush of heat ran through my whole body. I immediately removed my hand from Martha's hand. My mouth was full of uncontrollable pain. I noticed that Martha was red as if someone had hit her. The face is painted red. There was a bar in Surrey. Luck, it doesn't matter. Martha's mouth came out of. I felt his voice tremble. At the same time, I felt that it did not mind my touch, meaning that if I tried, this colorful bird could fall into my trap. I was just thinking about something when I saw Edgar taking a quick step towards me. Edgar's facial expressions were very strange. I started preparing myself for those moments. Edgar straight, like Hajar, came to Martha, and then he looked at me for a few moments, and then looked at Martha. He replied with a smile. No, I understand that in talking. Carr spoke in a very dry tone. It was a hit. What are you doing here? How long has the captain been missing you? There is no harm. The cheerful girl smiled and said, very good. I saw that the expression of displeasure spread on the face of the serious girl when the cheerful girl spoke. Lee could not hide from me, which we were both shocked to realize. Marta and I understood that Edgar didn't like that Mar was with me. Maybe he even saw me holding hands. She went with him anyway, in the same place for a few moments. Have been. Just as I was about to say something, I heard a voice, a man calling out to them both, and was coming towards them quickly, hearing the voice of the flamboyant girl. An expression of distaste spread across the face. Come to punish the soul. That under the lip. Standing suddenly, my eyes fell on two women standing together on the deck. Both of their faces grew big. Their expressions were completely different from each other. One was looking at the sea with very cheerful eyes, while the other seemed to be lost in her own thoughts. She had Sugarai's expression on her face, and the ritual should be increased. I slowly reached towards them both. Like a cabin in the possession of Jahangir and his wife Paras, I wanted to reply that the man came to him after such a long time. I recognized him when I saw him. His name was Kirtal Jahangir, who equaled me. The two cabins were booked. I didn't know there were so many beautiful women in my neighborhood. Approaching them, he was shocked to see that Paras was the same girl in both of them, with a striking resemblance in serious and determined faces. It seemed like both were sisters. Colonel Jahangir and his wife Paras were almost 15 years apart in their ages. The colonel was 15 years older than his wife. Not knowing what to think, Pars married a person 15 years older than her. The colonel was a very dry person. I had guessed that. Anyway, the second cabin was in the possession of his sister-in-law, Shabnam. After they both left, I thought that for a long time. That hello, I approached them and addressed them both. Both of them, bad at addressing me, was younger than the cheerful girl's face had a wave of happiness, while the other frowned and the other apple had a disgusted look on her face. This, seeing the expression of disbelief on the face of me. I stood there for a while as the shadows of the evening began to turn into the darkness of the night. And then a smile spread across his face. This is my elder sister. She does not like to talk to strangers. The other said in a cheerful tone. He returned to his cabin. My heart and mind became a breeding ground for different thoughts. Yes, of course. You think that male ceremony with strangers is not very good. It happened. I was thinking that going to my G could have been dangerous. But I thought that too. It is necessary to go there because by going to Baji, my life may be destroyed by Ruby's spirit. Even the little coin asked me to come to her at 12 o'clock in the night. So I finished my dinner and waited for 12 o'clock. As soon as I came out of the room at 12 o'clock, the semi-darkness in the corridor, the bulb on the roof of the corridor was failing to remove the semi-darkness. I had also taken my revolver as a precaution so that I could defend myself if G tried any adventure. I thought if he did any adventure, that would harm me. If there is any fear, I will shoot him immediately. Will be seen. Soon I was standing outside Jimmy's cabin. I knocked lightly on the door and then after a few seconds, the door opened and Jai welcomed me with a very sincere smile. Seeing his cabin, my eyes were open. On the walls, the skeletons of the dead skulls of various animals, and the cages were decorated very neatly. The room was semi-dark. The walls also featured pictures of Englishmen dressed as witches. Their names were also written under these pictures. In cray, there was a bed on the right and a wardrobe on the left, and in the middle there was a table on which there was a chart of English letters.
And Mia had arrived.
A chart I had seen in movies
Colonel
that was
David,
used to
John,
summon
and Andy
spirits.
were called with great
And on top of the
insistence.
chart,
Oliver's
was a white
father
globe.
and Oliver himself
Jimmy
had come to
told me,
call, and on
asked
their
to sit on this
insistence, the
table.
colonel had said yes at
Jimmy
that time.
placed both his hands on the
But
globe.
now he was not ready
As
to
soon
go
as
in
Jimmy
any way.
placed both hands,
Currently,
the globe
there
lit
was
up,
no
and a milky
particular
white
reason
light
to
spread
forbid it.
throughout the cabin.
John was
I
insisting
have
on
often
walking
seen
again
such
and again.
spectacles
Some
in movies
annoyance
of
was also
ordainers
ready.
performing spectacles
Jack
on the
was
streets,
completely silent.
whereof at that
Jack
moment
remembered
he seemed to be
everything
no
from the
less
last
than an
time,
orator who was
and now
mixing
he
the
would have
audience with his
preferred
sports
death
spectacles.
over the displeasure
A
of
bit
Colonel
dramatic
David.
after a while.
Ever
In the
since they
style of
started
Bola
living
Muslim
together,
Ashru,
both of them
a
had
person
become
would see at
accustomed
that
to
time.
him,
Do
and
you
many
believe
pleasant changes had
when
taken
you
place
shoot
in
at
them
them?
too.
Yes,
What
I
he
believe
used
in
to just
spirits.
smile at was
Why
now
not believe
becoming
when I
a
run
reality.
from place to place about Mother
Both of
Ruby's
them were
revenge?
understood to a great
He
extent.
smiled and said,
Sometimes they would
I
fight
know
so
Mr.
hard that
Spirits
they
has given
felt
me
they would
everything.
have to make amends.
He said in a slightly
It was just a few
sarcastic
days
tone.
ago.
What
He
does
had
it
brought
mean?
a citizen's card in
I was
his.
shocked.
John
After
had agreed
listening
to come
me,
immediately
he
on the
laughed for a
insistence
long
of paid.
time.
While it was
After
clear
that,
from
he said,
Andy's expression that he wanted to
Mr.
refuse.
Akesh, every
The colonel
human
also
being
knew what the
commits some
reason
sin
was,
at some point
so
in
he
their
also
life.
tried to avoid
It
it.
is another
But
thing
finally,
that
he
his
had to
sins
say
start
yes.
chasing him.
And as soon as he
I
left,
felt a bit ashamed
John
after
said to
listening to
Andy and him,
It was true.
"You should
Whatever
leave
the
this
reason,
job and
I
run a
had
grocery
committed
store."
the crime of
He
killing
said
Ruby.
seriously.
If it was
Why?
done, then I
My
should
father
divorce
was in
Ruby.
the police, and so
But
was
what
my
could have
grandfather.
happened now?
The
What
grocery store
happened is
was
already
yours,
done.
so do it yourself.
After a while, he looked
If
at
you
me
were a
and said,
grocery store, there would be
my dear
experience.
probably
They were
want to
still
raise the
thinking
spirit
who
of
to
his
scold?
wife. His
Yes,
accent was
yes,
spot on.
I am a drinker.
I was shocked to
and
hear
you are
what
the
he said,
bearer
and
of
I
great
looked at him
justice.
with very surprised
Andy
eyes.
also said more
Seeing the
rudely than
surprise on my
before
face,
that you
he
have good
smiled
looks.
meaningfully.
Don't
and
you
said,
try to remind me of my
all
times.
the spirits have told me why you are taking this
144 was
journey.
sitting from.
Hearing
Do I
this, I
know
was
when to
shocked
do
and
what?
burst into tears.
So why are you
He
telling
started
me?
looking in her direction
John,
with
what
his eyes.
nonsense were you talking
What
about? He
souls
said
are
after
all
Andy
about
left.
humans?
In this matter,
is
they had
known.
also become
Of
somewhat
course,
silent in 2 months.
cry past, present,
Because you are a
future
mean
all
person,
can tell.
and you are washed with
There
milk.
was reverence in his tone.
Andy was freaking
I
out.
jumped when I heard what he said.
I am milk washed.
Suddenly, a thought
I
struck
had
me
never
very
seen it from
quickly.
that point of view. Jay was
Will I
written in my
get it or
name.
not?
I
What
was
will
looking
be my
at him in
welcome
the
if
mirror,
I get
sir.
rid of Ruby, hearing
It
my
should be
words on his
strong in
lips?
every case.
But a very deep
If he
smile
considers
spread over
himself
his face
low,
the next moment.
and if he does not consider
Set in
himself
style.
right,
This
then he
will
should
be
have
known by
confidence in
asking
him
the
to
spirits.
face everyone.
Now I am
John
starting
said that he was
process.
right,
Having
but his
said
manner was
that,
bad.
I don't
They
know
had also
whose
made him realize,
incomprehensible time.
and he was left with a
I started
careless
to say
shrug.
something. At first, his
While he was
voice
sorry
low,
that now he will
then
be asked to
gradually it became
apologize to
louder.
Andy, but
Hearing
he
his
too,
voice, I felt that many
did not
evil
see
spirits
anyone.
had started to fight together.
Andy became faster
Hearing
than
his
before.
voice, I
To
felt a
my
strange
fiancé,
fear.
to John
Suddenly, my
Bai's
eyes fell on the
sister-in-law.
globe, which had
I
started to
didn't
turn
have
green.
to. It
as if
is known
someone
that he
had hit
married
it
a
with
millionaire in
green pitch.
Kuwait,
I
considering you
looked into
unworthy.
Jamie's eyes, and they were
You are
bleeding.
trying to change the
After a
subject by
few moments
prying.
of knowing what
Now,
I saw,
John said,
my eyes
shaking
were
with
filled with
anger.
astonishment.
Let's just
Brown
go do
smoke
your job.
was spreading in the confined
I will
atmosphere
come
of the
now,
cabin.
he said and left.
That smoke was
Andy had
swirling
returned
around
at
me.
9 o'clock at night.
Suddenly, my eyes widened
know
in
what I have to
surprise
do.
as the brown smoke
Not afraid to
swirled in the
confront people
confined air
because
of
of
the
his
cabin.
cynical
The white
thinking.
globe had suddenly
John
turned
S.
red.
style was
I
insulting.
started hearing strange
Colonel
sounds.
David was worried that
Suddenly,
both were fighting
I
equally,
also heard a
and he
voice
took
that
the
had
side
a
of one of
devotional
them and
tone.
explained it
I
to
am
the other.
grateful to you, O holy
It was time for
souls
people to
whirling in
eat,
the endless
and today
airs,
was Sunday.
for your invitation to
Andy
me.
had brought ice cream, and
accepted
Roman
to
had
come
also
here.
made biryani
My wife
kheer
Katie,
and
who left me,
koftas.
is now
After a
among
long
you.
time,
I
the
am
colonel,
asking
along
you
with
about
Andy,
her.
was worried about where he had
Najmi's
left.
tone was
The
dramatic.
colonel was expecting
In
him to
response
admit
to
his
Jimmy's
mistake
words,
and was
the
asking
sound
him
of
about it.
cymbals started echoing
Why
in the
didn't
air.
he come back?
I
When
saw
I
the
called him, his
expression on
mobile was in the
Jimmy's
room.
face. They
Now
had
Andy
become
was sitting
strange, and his
silently,
whole
so he
face
will
is
call
covered
here
in
in there.
sweat.
But he was
But he
quite
is looking
satisfied.
at me and also
Well, do
towards
you
the
want to
smoke.
enjoy listening to my
The
mouth?
sounds of jingles were
By
still
doing
going
this,
on.
you have developed the
After
limit
a
of your
few moments,
thinking like
Jimmy
your
looked
brother
at him and said,
and have access to the
"Oh,
market.
great souls!
And you have come
But
to be a
between you,
bearer of high thinking
Ruby is there."
and principles.
After hearing
Any
Ruby's
stupid
name,
thoughts?
the jangers sang.
What do you think
The
we should
voices
eat?
got louder, not knowing what Jimmy
John
was
to
talking
come,
to
he
them
said
about.
with surprise, seeing his
After a while, the
disinterestedness.
smoke started to clear.
He will not
And
come
after
now,
a few moments,
or
there
he
was
will
no
eat from
trace of the
somewhere
smoke.
outside.
After the spirits
Why are you
left,
beating
he
my
turned on
brother?
the light in the room.
Talk to me
I
now
saw
was
that his
torn
whole
from John.
face was more wet than
I
what he
do
had
not
seen.
consider you
He
worthy to
sat there
talk.
for a few moments,
Then why will I talk
and then
to
moved
you?
towards the place
Andy
where
said
the
after
water
getting
bottle
up
was kept
and
full
went
of
out.
water. He
John
emptied the bottle
careless.
immediately.
Still they
Then
wait
he
for
sat
some
back in his
time.
chair.
He said he
For
was
a few
also
moments,
sitting.
he turned to me.
At 10 o'clock,
looked,
John had
and
come
then
and went
said,
straight to the room.
My dearest
The colonel
friend,
called out,
if you believe me, abandon
146.
this journey.
Say yes,
Why I
he
was
said
shocked.
to Carol while glancing at Andy
Because
sitting
this
next to him.
journey will put you in such
Later,
trouble
a few days before
that
the
it will be
wedding,
difficult
the
to
city
get
had
out
come
of.
to cause power
Well, he
loss.
said calmly.
With great insistence,
I was shocked after
he was still in the
listening to him.
city.
But
He
if
was
I
going
crossed
back
the water
today.
plane without
Those
any
people were
difficulties,
just coming from
then
the
Ruby's
office that he
spirit
had come.
can save me.
Where have
Otherwise,
you
if
been for so
difficulties
long?
arise,
We wait for
anything
food.
can happen.
Well, I'm
He
coming.
explained himself.
Roman had gone
Relief from
inside
Ruby
saying,
can be found in your
"Put
city
food."
too. But if
Colonel
you
David
continue
had
this
confirmed
journey
the
further,
tickets for you guys.
you will go
I
home
came
in
to
such
give them.
difficulties.
Jack
He
and his sister
is-
will also come.
When I came
These
out
are
of the
5
cabin,
tickets.
it was 1
Tomorrow
o'clock
I
in the
will
night.
wait for you guys at the
I was
train
greeted
station.
by cold and dry breezes.
Then we will leave together in the morning.
Jimmy's words made the
Then we
mind
will
more
go to the
confused.
village as soon as we can get the
After
idea by
strolling on the
6
deck for
o'clock
a
in the
while, I
evening.
returned to my
That's why
cabin
no one
and tried
stops
to
there.
sleep.
He was standing in
sleep
front of
did
them
not
with his
claim my
eyes
ear for a
lowered so
long
they could
time.
not see the red in his
Very
eyes.
disturbing thoughts were
Andy
running in my
had noticed,
mind.
and now Bill's
I don't know whose
complacency
trouble it was that
had
was
left
going
for
to
some
ask for the
time, and
address
he was
of my
clearly
house.
looking restless.
The sound of
They
knocking
both sat at the table.
said in a meaningful
and he
tone,
hadn't come yet.
content.
See what he needed.
This is your future.
We will
as bright
come
as
by
day.
ourselves.
It
said
is
the
obvious
colonel
that the
hesitantly.
spirits have told
But John
everything
had got
about the end of
tickets
this
and
journey of
promised to
yours.
come.
And
He
what
was
is your
going with
case
some
with
friends
Ruby?
in his personal car.
Hearing her talk,
He could reach
I was
the
shocked. How
destination
could it be?
directly, but
The
for these
tears can
people,
tell everything
he was
about
going to
the future and the
California,
present.
and from there
From the
he would take
expression
them
on
to
my
his
face,
village.
he
He had
understood
left
what I
after
was
drinking
saying.
tea.
Hearing this,
Andy
my eyes
immediately got up and
automatically
went to
to the
Kern's
clock
room.
on the wall of the
They
cabin.
also reached close to his
The
door.
wall was announcing
John,
12
what's up,
o'clock
man?
at night.
Nothing, I'm coming,
When
go
they
you?
are freed
There
from
was
the
a
bondage
heaviness
of
in
the
his
body,
voice.
everything
Look at me.
becomes clear to them.
Andy held her
Who
face
can
in
be
his
so
hands
late
and
at
lifted
night?
her up.
I muttered under my breath.
Can you pack your corner
I
clothes?
was shocked after
Roman
listening
had
to him.
asked Colonel, and he
Bridge,
was left
I
looking at
said.
Al Andy.
What will be
Let's
the end
eat,
of my
he
journey?
said while looking down.
Ran,
Now
and then
Andy's
he said,
restraint was
the
answered.
next moment a
It's
smile
a
spread
3-day
across
wedding.
his face.
It's very hot.
Who could be so
I have
late
not
at
been there
night?
either, but I
Maybe
have
it's
heard
me.
that it is very hot
Illusion,
and very cold
so I
there,
would make the
said
sound of
John,
this knocking
and he
my
shook his
illusion.
head and left.
After listening to
Forgive
me, he
me,
smiled
man,
meaningfully
please.
and lay back
He
on
was
the
brought
bed
to her.
and went on a sea voyage.
Now there was silence
It was
inside
almost the
for a
third
long
day.
time when someone tapped on
Readers
his
also
shoulder
thought
with
the
a
same.
finger.
It must have
It was
been that on
Roman.
the request of
He
an agent.
indicated that he should
Why
come
did I
back.
decide to leave some
Both
things on time,
returned to
my
the
friends?
table and sat down.
Yes, if you
After
abandon
some
this
time,
journey,
both of them had
I did
recovered,
not understand
and now
his
their
words,
eyes were red.
nor will you.
Main row, it was
I had heard
completely
that
normal.
sea travel keeps
They were
evil
surprised,
forces away
but
from a
four
person.
were earning.
The person who has been
After this
bewitched
kind of quarrel,
is
they
sent
thought
across
that I
the
would
water
have to have
break
the
the
baby
spell of the
delivered.
devil or
But
spirit.
everything was fine with the second
trip was
pregnancy,
approved.
and now it's been a
I
month.
did not understand
I will
what
also
kind of
take off
trouble
my
was
clothes.
coming towards me if I
Andy also
abandoned
got
this
up,
journey.
and the colonel said,
A
looking at
second
John,
knocking sound was heard.
a few days ago,
This
Andy
time it
was
was so
not willing
clear
to go.
that I thought it was an
Yes,
illusion
but he was
anyway.
not understanding
If
me
I do,
and what I
I will
said.
be subject to
There
Ruby's
is no room
revenge,
for
and I
that
don't.
kind of sentimentality
go
in our
home with
work
countless
I was trying to
problems.
convey to him.
But Jagan
And by
had said
saying
at the
bad
time of
things
his
to
death
G,
that souls are
it
not
was
in
said to
water.
me.
Was
What
not
he was
ready to
doing was
understand.
hearing him tell Azar to
Just
prepare
as
the
I was
galaxy.
thinking this, I heard the
He and
knock
Andy
again.
thought of this today.
It sounded exactly like
Did you
that.
understand? Colonel
Someone
had
has
asked.
damaged the door.
Andy was feeling
The
sick
sound was
inside.
something like
Whatever
that.
he thought about
Who
it.
was I slightly
He was also
higher,
embarrassed to think that you were
hearing the
angry
raised
because of his
voice, it
mistake.
seemed as if it came
But
from
sir,
the deck
where
at the
will
end
we
of the
get the
corridor.
time for all these things?
The voice was
It is
confirming
up to
that
the people
someone
to
was
remember
suffering
this.
from a state
Take
of
this
great
to heart.
anguish and
Think
anxiety.
about it and react.
I took slow
Yes, it is
steps
the work
and
of
crossed
cobble
the corridor
traders to do as
and
a case
immediately
starts and
came to
ends.
the deck.
This
in
is
a cool and
exactly how how
breeze
such
of
an
the
emotional
sea
period
hit
should
me.
begin and end.
The sound of the
Then
waves
even
of the
thinking
sea
about it
seemed
comes
to
under
me
the
to be
category of
overwhelming
character and
in this
personal
deep
weakness
darkness.
for us.
He
He
said
had
in a
openly
pleasant
explained,
voice.
and he was
The
also
sound of
lost in
knocking
thought.
became louder
Was
and
telling to
louder,
go with him
as if
because his
someone was
sister's
trying to
ticket was
open the
also
door.
taken, and he was
The door
laughing
will
by
break.
planning ahead.
I sound
On the
bitter.
second day,
I
his
ran,
departure
"I'm
was by
coming."
train at 6 o'clock in the
Having
morning.
said that, I got up from the
Azar
bed
was
and then
seen in
took
the
my
Galaxy's
revolver,
place
which
with
I had
Amelia,
kept with me
who
during this
approached
trip,
Colonel
in
David
case
with
of
the
any
child
danger.
as they approached.
And walking on my paws,
"Hello?"
I went to the door before opening the
Daddy
door.
said and bowed his
As
head
soon
to
as I heard
receive
a sharp
love.
knock,
He had
I
a
jumped
smile
at
on
the door because there was no one
his
outside,
lips.
and it was suddenly
Giggle
full
could
of
not
darkness.
stop his spontaneous
A thought
laughter.
occurred to me last night.
She was standing like that
There
till
was a
she
light
put her
bulb in
hand
the
on his
hallway,
head.
but that bulb
Then she
had
went
been
to Andy
removed,
shyly,
or it had been
who was
fused.
looking at
Come.
both Azar and
My
John with
condition was
devouring
bad.
eyes.
You should
John
think that
said
if
to
you
do
are in a
this
place where it
nonsense,
is
he said
dark,
with a wave
no
of
matter
his
how
hand.
big you are,
John
The
had
wind
gone
will
to
come out
find the
and leave by
compartment.
thinking I took a step
And if
forward
this
as I
toy
went
cries
forward.
in the night, I will
felt
shoot
an
myself, he
unnatural
said angrily.
coldness. So
He
intense
remembered the
coldness
time
prevails
spent with
in the
his
dead
aunt.
cells.
What nonsense
Bumping.
is this?
I was squinting
Colonel
my
David
eyes in
used
the
to
dark.
feel that he was also a
The
child in
sound
front
of
of
the
him.
skis stopped as soon
Indeed,
as I
when the
came
shroud
out.
was tied on
There
the
was
head
someone
for the
who was
protection of
asking
the
me for
country,
help. But who?
then what is the use of
Suddenly,
going
the
back
thought
to
of
the
Carlos
past
came to my
emotional
mind,
periods
and I was
and
shocked to
wasting the
think that it was
undertones of
not
life?
like some demon
He
sent
was
by
right.
Jimmy had given me a
Nothing
voice.
is impossible.
I was looking
So
around,
why?
but I didn't see anyone.
Don't just look forward.
Suddenly, I felt as
learning
if
from
someone was
mistakes,
standing on the
fighting
deck.
with an inner
The shadow
passion,
of a man was visible
getting
on the
acquitted
deck.
in the court of his
It
heart
looked
and
like a
mind,
girl,
and
but her
getting rid of
features
all
were not
kinds of
clearly
temptations
visible.
was actually his
I was
victory.
looking around when
And maybe
suddenly
that's
my
why
ears
John
again
thought
heard
everything by
someone's
himself.
muffled sobs.
He used to do it.
This
And
sound
even
was
if it
coming
was
from the
proved to be
same
wrong,
place where I saw
once
someone
he admitted
standing.
his mistake,
Inevitably,
not even
someone
doubt
was
it
standing
again.
on the deck crying.
that is what I
I
said, and
quickly
that
reached
timer
the
could have
deck,
been off.
and there was no one there.
John did not tell you.
Suddenly, I
Jack
heard the
told you
sound
with
of sobbing
satisfaction.
from the opposite
He
direction.
expected that Krish would
Now, a
object,
cold wave of
but he
fear
was
ran through my
relieved that he was
entire
now
being.
ready to be a part of
I
this
quickly
game.
turned around
What
and
John
saw
had
that there
not
was
told,
no one standing
Andy
on the
had
deck.
asked Sadi.
I didn't know where he
John
had
was
gone.
returning after looking
Now
for
the
Hoagie.
sobs could be heard
Andy
from time
was
to
facing
time,
the front,
whose
and he was coming from
was now
behind.
fear.
Not only
I had
this,
changed.
but also
Was
feed
the
your
cold was
complaints to
so
your aunt,
intense that
along
I
with
felt
me.
like I was in a morgue.
I was. And when you would
Suddenly, the
throw them
sound of
both
skiing
out,
came again.
she would go to her aunt and cry.
Supposed to be,
but no
yes,
tears would
you
come
why
out.
not in front?
Now they will
In
also come out.
response,
I
the
have
sound of
updated
the
it.
wind blew.
It may take
Will
a
you
needle down
help
its
me?
throat, which it
The
will
same
later
loud
throw out of
voice
storage on
screamed
its
in my
own.
ears.
In addition,
Yes, I
its
knew that the
programs
heart
are
was
often
pouring out of my
updated.
throat,
You will see.
and I was pouring out my
was
sister's
given.
drink to my
Till
wife.
sometime
As
later,
soon
they
as
were
I heard
sitting
the
in the
sounds in
train.
my ears.
This
The
compartment
sound
was
of these
reserved for
coins
them,
was so
and they were all
overwhelming
talking
that
to
it
each
seemed
other.
as if a
When
human
Amelia
being
got
was
up from
very
his
much
place
in our
and called
condition.
Andy to hold the six
While
while
running,
extending it.
suddenly Marati Pilla and I
Aji,
fell
just
down
hold
and
him.
came home from
I will
Karina's
give him
pillar,
breakfast.
standing
Tay
in
to
front of
Daddy
Pira
and
Marmat.
brother-in-law.
As soon as I was covered with
Involuntarily,
the
Andy
pillar,
had taken the
I
baby in
also
his
saw
lap
red in the
and
night.
turned to Azer again.
I used to
and
lose
was
the words
left
of Jake
drinking
and that
blood.
of Souls.
Was all
There was
three of
nothing
them
but
were
waves of
smiling,
water.
and Jack's
I
smile
was in a
was
strange dilemma
mischievous,
as to what to do.
but he was shocked to see
Suddenly,
John.
with an
He
idea, I
also had
moved
a
towards
smile
the
on his
part of
face,
the wharf where the
but a
light
strange
boats
look was
were moored
visible.
in case of an
He
emergency.
was shocked.
So these
He
boats
remembered
should
his
be
trip
used.
to Los Angeles.
Suddenly, I felt
The
like a
same
shadow
expression
passed
was
my
on
ribs.
John's face
I
at
was
that time
immediately
as well.
startled. The
He
feeling
had
of
come back
passing
from the
near the
mouth of
decoration was very intense.
Following Andy's
I
eyes,
walked
Azar
quickly and
also
reached the
thought,
place where
and
the
he was
boats were
also
moored.
shocked.
Then,
Now
despite
Colonel
being
David
among them,
was with him.
I saw
Both of
Saeed's
them
shadow
leaned forward
standing
and
near a
told him
boat.
the situation,
His back was towards
and
me.
they started looking
How
at him
his
with
lion
concern.
looked in the dark,
It
looking
was
at his
because
style.
of the colonel that he had controlled
It seems that
himself.
he,
Otherwise,
there is an
horror is
intention
his.
and intention
What
to
was I
launch
supposed
the
to
boat
do?
into
His
the sea.
programs, ass idiot.
Hey,
he
who
makes
are you? I
dance
have this
like
white-
monkeys.
Only
and you
water
dance.
is ineffective.
Now the citizens will ask
The
where it was
brother-in-law.
earlier and from
He
where it
listened
has
to me
been
and
revealed.
walked towards me.
And who will operate
As
the
soon as he
remote
turned
control?
towards me,
He said
I could not
angrily
see his
and
foot.
helplessly.
But I was shocked to see
I
his
don't
eyes.
run remote anymore.
He didn't have eyes.
AG, when
but
I went to
two
my mother's
flames of
house for
fire
the
were
delivery of the
visible from the
child,
mouths of his eyes.
you had forgotten me.
I don't
It
know
was said
how
very
long the right
sweetly,
mind was
and
forced.
people passing by
There was
were
darkness
jealous
all
of
around.
Andy Fortune.
The first feeling
Who
on
makes
writing
whom
something was
dance like
just that I am
monkeys?
in the case
John
of the
had
case.
asked from behind
I
with
looked
Cooley.
around and was
Andy
blinded.
color was blown,
When I
and
tried
before
to get up,
anyone could
I felt
answer,
a sharp pain
he
in
was
my
told
head,
a brilliant lie
as if I
by
had been blasted by a
BGBG
peacock.
had gone.
This will bring light here.
And while they are
I
talking
gave you
about
a
the
white
Marwar
sorry,
port,
after which
he
the moles
dances
were
like
not
a
clear.
monkey with Colonel David.
But it seemed that it was
Andy
all of some
Dumbledore
kind. At that
saw
moment,
from
I
what
thought
happened
that
to my son.
it was
The
dark,
colonel
that
had
it was
asked
not
him.
from any
He
demon.
stared blankly in shock.
Who are you?
Nothing.
Around my
I'm
ears.
fine. His
Hearing
voice
the
sounded
voice,
as if he had
I
spoken
was
in his
shocked that I
sleep.
don't know who was standing
Andy
beside
was
the
again
temple at night
giddy
from
with
the
the thought
unseen.
of some
Said that
supernatural
this is one of
power
my ideas.
overpowering him.
As soon as I
How are
come
you
in, I
shaping
fear
it?
to take me.
John picked up the goods. It's good. How long will it take to get ready? John, I will not build the shape. It will be fitted with custom masks, and it is a more advanced and high-power project than both of them.